Hello and welcome to Retech, and today we're going to do a little bit on the BBC Micro, and it was because of the way this machine was designed, it was able to do a lot of things that most of the machines of their time struggled to do. So you have to put yourself in the shoes of a school child of about 11 or 12 years old, and they're kind of coming up to their computer science lessons, and they walk into a school lab, and it's full of newly minted BBC Micros. The school in question upgraded from Video and Color Genies at around this time, and they also got rid of a lot of their Commodore PETs, which they were running at the same time as the Video Genies. So you walk into this classroom and you see these rows and rows of these on desks waiting for students to get their grubby hands on it, and you kind of realize that these are a bit of a step up from the Video Genies, the Color Genies, the Commodore PETs, and basically most other 8-bit micros of the time. Now, it doesn't take long to realize that this is the case, especially when you hear these talking. And that would have blown the socks off of a child of the 80s, because nothing really talked apart from the odd speak and spell machine, and maybe if you were lucky enough to get hold of a Texas TI 99 4A with its speech ROMs on the side of the system itself. So, you know, there was hardly anything out there that could literally talk, but talk on your command. And this is what this video is all about. But just before we do that, we're going to look at why this BBC was so different. So if you take a look at this motherboard, this is a BBC motherboard straight out of a Model B, and you'll see down here there's a lot of empty ROM sockets. Okay, now Acorn were very good at providing just about everything that you wanted out of an 8-bit micro at the time, and that also included masses of expansion, from coprocessor expansion to a direct tube interface to floppy disk drives, printer interfaces, and you could even get Ethernet for these machines, which was their version of your private network, long before most people were even thinking about networking micros, let alone computer systems together of the time. And there's a bit of a story where Bill Gates completely ignored the networking side of the BBC Micro. All he was interested in was trying to push his MS-DOS onto the BBC, and at the time the creators of the BBC Micro, and one of them was Herman Hauser, rejected the idea simply because he said it was a backward step compared to what they had already on these machines. So these were kind of quite a way ahead of their time, but still they weren't as advanced as Acorn's original designs, because it was meant to be a fully dual processor system. But you know, things changed when the BBC got involved with its BBC Micro initiative and trying to get micros into schools, but it was still a very powerful platform. Now, coming back to these ROM sockets, all you had to do was plug in a ROM. No discs, no cassettes, no nothing, and you could change what this machine to do. If you wanted it to be a word processor, plug in a word processor ROM. If you wanted to do spreadsheets, put in a spreadsheet ROM. If you wanted to do desktop publishing, put in the ROM. If you wanted to do graphics for the mouse, plug in a ROM. Everything really was ROM based on these machines, and it made it so convenient. And because of this, speech synthesis was on a ROM, and it was such an easy thing and an accessible thing for people to use and to get to grips with. And that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. You can see there's a selection of chips on this board here, and basically there's one here called speech, and all you need to do is to drop that into one of the ROM sockets right here, and that's it. And you're not limited to one. You could put speech, your little desktop publishing package on here, WordWise Plus, whatever you wanted into these sockets, and you could just select them as you needed to use them, or you could prioritize them to boot straight into a word processor if you like. Okay, so once you turn the machine on, you get the normal Acorn DFS, but you also get this title at the top which says Speech version 1.03. Now, I've got two versions of this. This is the earlier one, but you know, it's fine, it works, it does its job, and I can't really find too much difference between the versions. So what we'll be doing is using this one for now, and what you'll see is nothing really happens, you know, but it's a very easy system to use. So can you imagine at the age of roughly 11 in the very early 1980s, and you heard this coming out of a BBC Micro. So it would have been a bit of a shock to someone of that era and that age to hear a machine kind of talking away at you. And this Micro made it very easy to do. So if I quickly show you the programming behind it and how easy it is to do on this machine, especially back then, you get an idea of how kind of special these machines really were. But before we do that, that extract came from something called the Doddelson Messages, and it was about a period in the early 1980s when a BBC Micro was apparently being communicated with from the past and the future. There's a very good version of this story on a channel called the Y-Files, so I'd suggest you check that out, and it's quite an interesting thing, and it's quite a novel thing for a computer of the time to be kind of implicated and involved in. But back to the BBC Micro and how it kind of works. So if I now list that program, as you can see here, there's a little basic program, and it's quite easy for people and students to get to grips with, and it's relatively simple as well. It uses virtually plain English, which was a good thing about BASIC. It kind of used a lot of the terms that you would use in normal speech, but this is the important one, okay? Without line 1 saying start speech, it doesn't do anything. So the way it's laid out is very simple. This is the most important line. This is turns literally the ROM on. It says basically turn on for speech, and that's the most important one. Without that, none of this works. And the asterisk is the marker to turn it on. Most things on the BBC Micro for ROMs are star whatever, star word, star ROM, star speech, and so on, okay? So, and the rest of it's just like in BASIC, where you would print things on the screen. You're literally changing the print command to say, and it can be anything. And this is that little message that you heard a few minutes ago, and it's very simple. It's just start say. You're just telling it to say something. That's how simple BASIC was. And you can just do it without a command. Start say, put it in quotes, Now you can see the limitations basically, but it works on a phoneme or a phoneme system where it's actually just breaking down the sounds. So B could be the at but curt style of it that you learn when you're a child. So because you've got A, B, C and at but curt, so you've got two different sides of the alphabet and the way it sounds. So you can see I am a but and so on micro. Now that doesn't work very well. So if you want BBC, we'll give that a try. And there you go. So if I just copy that again, okay, and you can just extend it to get the sound you want. And then you get more of an E and a B sound rather than a B and a E sound. So you've just got to be a little bit careful on how you actually write things down. So if I do star say A, it says A. But if I do star say B, you get the B. So that's the most common sound you're going to be using the B letter for. It's going to be the B, as in bus. And if you do the C is a cut, you might not have been able to hear that, but it's more of a cut, as in cat. You very rarely use the C as in a C really within the language. It's more of a cut sound, so it's using the basic sound. So if you wanted the C, you would probably just use the S and double E. C. So it's more of it's the way you pronounce things more than the way you actually kind of say the letters and write them down as well. So it's kind of it's more of an oral version of what we say, so it's breaking it down into phonemes. But the other way was allophones, which is very similar, but it's breaking your speech down. So they had problem with the word redeemer. So if I to redo it, you just got to think of how you would say it. There we go, we got redeemer instead. So it's just the way you say it. Your spelling has to change really for this, but you know it gets quite intuitive after a while. It's just the way you speak really, to be honest, and that's the way it was designed to be, because it's literally breaking down the language. And to be honest, modern systems don't work much different. So if we clear the screen now and I come down and I do star say hi, you soon realize it's not going to sound right. Okay, star. So even if you try two eyes, it's not going to sound right. So you have to kind of work on what you've got to say and break it down into the basics really. So you might have to change the word to hey, as in H-A-Y, just to get that sound or the word you want. So it's a case of playing around with it. I mean, you were thinking very early 80s here, and that's literally how it works. So if I run that program again. So as you can see, it's or as you can hear rather, it's not perfect, but it's a massive step forward. And it's relatively simple to do, and it's one of the nicer speech synthesizers really to get to grips with, and it's one of the early adopters of speech. And you got to remember, this is on a very early 8-bit micro, and that would have blown people away because they could hear relatively clear speech coming out of a box really that sat on a desk. Okay, so there we have a BBC Micro talking to you back in the early 1980s, and the only other machines which kind of put the speech side of it into their OS. Now this was an addition in ROM, but it was, once you plug the ROM in, it was all part of the operating system. It was all combined with it. Was the Apple Mac and the Amiga. They were the first adopters of these speech to go within their GUI and their operating system. And because the BBC was widely adopted within most of the schools within the UK, and also a lot of private users as well, because a lot of parents wanted to give their children a leg up on the education system and introduce them to new technologies and the future as it was seen then, they went out and bought the BBC Micro, or later on the Acorn Electron, because that had a lot of the BBC Micro technology within it, and also the same BBC Basic, but they were quite expensive. These machines were mostly outside the budgets of most families of the time, especially when you added in a tape deck or a disk drive, and then the ROMs for the speech and the software to do anything on the machine and so on. So you had to be fairly wealthy or fairly dedicated to go down the route of having a BBC Micro. But the machine was a very capable platform, and it was I would consider one of the best platforms of the day. It literally, the specifications and what these machines could do would kind of beat most other micros hands down. And that's not flag waving, because I do like other machines such as the Commodore and the Ataris and all this kind of thing, but kind of spec for spec, there's not a lot of machines could kind of beat the BBC Micro. I mean, gaming, yeah, there were a lot more capable gaming machines out there, but if you wanted to do much more than that, that's where these machines came into their own. But as a kid, and you first heard that, it kind of blew you away, and it's taken me a long time to kind of get that nostalgia effect back by finding the correct ROM that I was using at school. Sounds a bit odd, but you know, I think we all like to kind of revisit our past now and again. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you got a BBC Micro, try and get a hold of a copy of Speech. There are a few systems out there. This is one of the nicest ones to use, but there are others out there. Some of them are more difficult than the others, and Acorn's own was a little bit more difficult. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this kind of wander down nostalgia lane and to see what these machines were doing back in the early 1980s. So thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Please subscribe. Thank you.